Welcome to this explainer on Aristophanes' absolute masterpiece of ancient comedy, Lysistrata. Okay, let's dive into this, because we're looking at a text from 411 BC that somehow manages to mix outrageously raunchy humor with some seriously profound commentary on the nature of war. So, how do you actually end a 21-year war? Just imagine living in a society that's locked in a devastating, seemingly endless conflict. By the time this play hit the stage, the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta had been dragging on for over 2 decades. I mean, the state was bleeding, the losses were astronomical, and honestly, there seemed to be absolutely zero prospect of peace on the horizon. The guys in charge were just stuck in this loop of stubborn, macho posturing, and the citizens were completely exhausted. So how do you stop it? That's the exact problem our playwright decided to tackle head-on. The man who took on this monumental question was Aristophanes, who you probably know as the master of old comedy. But what makes him so fascinating in this specific context is his unusually modern empathy for the female condition. You gotta remember, ancient Athens was a fiercely male-dominated society. Playwrights usually just reinforce the stereotype that women were these irrational creatures who needed constant protection from themselves. But Aristophanes, he completely flips the script. He presents women not as the problem, but as the incredibly strategic, highly capable solution to a massive disaster created entirely by men. To really get the joke, we have to look at the grim reality of 411 BC. The war originally kicked off back in 431 BC. Then, in 413 BC, Athens suffers the catastrophic defeat of the Sicilian expedition. It was a failure of such epic proportions that women in these plays would literally mock the men for losing their spears and shields in battle. And this brilliantly illustrates the backdrop for Lysistrata, which premiered just 2 years later. The incredibly violent, high-stakes, and frankly bleak reality of ancient Athens is exactly what makes the burlesque, laugh-out-loud comedy of this play hit so hard. It was a desperate situation demanding a desperate and hilarious remedy. The whole premise rests on this one undeniable realization by our exceptional protagonist, Lysistrata. She looks around at the political landscape and recognizes a really harsh truth. The men are completely failing the state. They're just incapable of ending the destruction and the tragic waste of human life. The whole male power structure has basically fractured under the weight of endless war and corruption. So Lysistrata realizes she has to step up, protect the women from their own worst instincts, unify them, and just take matters entirely out of the men's hands. To force these guys to the negotiating table, she comes up with a highly strategic, two-pronged attack. It is a radical and honestly hilarious master plan. Step 1, a self-denying ordinance where all the women of Greece withhold all sexual privileges from their husbands and lovers. Total strike. Step 2, a tactical military maneuver to actually seize the Acropolis, which crucially is where the state treasure is kept. That cuts off the funding for the war entirely. It's a brilliant, completely absurd combination of psychological and economic warfare. The sheer boldness of this plan is captured perfectly when she pitches it to the women. She flat out declares, "We must refrain from the male organ altogether." She instructs the wives and mistresses to sit around indoors, dressed to the nines in their best transparent silks and prettiest jewelry, completely depilated, basically doing everything to drive the men absolutely crazy. But they must refuse all sexual favors whatsoever until a peace treaty is signed. And if they're forced by sheer physical strength, they're instructed to just lie there totally passive with an ill grace, offering the absolute minimum amount of gratification. While this massive pan-Hellenic sex strike is getting organized, the second prong of the attack goes into motion. The older women of Athens literally lock themselves inside the gates of the Acropolis. When the old men of the city try to assault the doors with heavy olive stalks and flaming bundles of wood to burn them out, they are thoroughly repulsed. The men run into what's described as a terrible regiment of women, fully armed and ready for a fight, complete with vendors of garlic and tavern keepers just shouting a torrent of insults at them. The state's money is completely locked down. No cash, no war. Now, getting the younger women to actually agree to the sex strike in the first place, not exactly easy. There's this fantastic comedic scene where women assemble from all across Greece. You've got Lampito from Sparta, delegates from Boeotia, women from all over. And when Lysistrata first drops the bomb about giving up lovemaking, there is massive shock and heavy reluctance. One woman even says she'd rather literally walk through fire. But Lysistrata is a master of persuasion. She eventually wins them over, and they agree to bind themselves with an inviolable oath. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Aristophanes injects some incredible, character-driven humor right into this pivotal moment. Instead of a traditional macho sacrifice, swearing over a slaughtered sheep on a shield like the men do in Aeschylus's tragedies, the women decide to swear their solemn oath over a massive hollow bowl of Thasian wine. And the ultimate penalty they agree on if they break their vow of chastity? The character Kalanice repeats it, "But if I break it, let my bowl be filled with water." It's this brilliant spoof on male rituals, showing that these women prioritize their wine just as much as their political cause.
Throughout the whole play, Aristophanes draws this stark, really dynamic contrast between the male and female approaches to politics. The male approach? It's one of chaotic failure. We're talking brute force, catastrophic military loss, massive corruption, and just incredibly stiff, stubborn posturing. In total contrast, the female approach is presented with calm, structured logic. It's all about conciliation, highly sophisticated assemblies that actually mirror democratic structures, and a genuine desire to untangle the political mess. It's a complete subversion of the era's traditional sexual stereotypes, suggesting that women are more than equals when it comes to political organization.
Which brings us to this famous, incredibly sharp debate between Lysistrata and an Athenian magistrate. This guy is furious. He is completely dismissive of the women, demanding to know how a bunch of housewives who spend their days working with yarn and spools could possibly restore peace and order across all the warring countries of Greece. He basically laughs in her face. But she just turns his insult into a flawless argument. So the crucial point is how she leans into that exact visual metaphor. She tells him, "When we are winding thread, and it is tangled, we pass the spool across and through the skein. Even so, to finish off the war, we shall send embassies hither and thither and everywhere to disentangle matters." She's arguing that women have actually been much better stewards of the city's heritage. They represent stability, literally weaving the social fabric together, while the men have done nothing but fracture and destroy it. Well, the magistrate, as you might guess, cannot handle this at all. He declares he would rather die 1,000 deaths than obey a woman wearing a veil. So Lysistrata just completely dismisses him. She literally tells him to take her veil, wrap it around his own head, hold his tongue, take a basket, card some wool, and munch beans. The war shall be women's business. It is a spectacular moment of comedic humiliation that leaves the male authority figure utterly degraded and entirely powerless against the women's organized resistance. And the execution of Lysistrate's plan, it works flawlessly. Before long, the men are driven to the absolute breaking point. The play leans super heavily into the physical comedy here. You have the chorus of old men observing that the younger men are suffering from a dreadful torture of strong nervous tension. They're walking around with a, let's say, very visible malady that the old men joke only exercise can remedy. The embargo is agonizingly effective, and the men's stubbornness just crumbles instantly under the weight of sheer biological desperation. Aristophanes really drives this home with an incredibly direct and hilarious punchline from an Athenian citizen. Completely overwhelmed by the prolonged sex strike, he groans, "Unless peace is made very soon, we shall find no resource but to fuck Clisthenes," who, for context, was a notoriously effeminate man in Athens at the time. This line perfectly captures the absolute desperation of these guys. They are completely at the mercy of the women. All their grand political posturing has been entirely defeated by their own biology. Let's move to and see how this builds to a hilarious climax. Envoys from both Athens and Sparta finally arrive at the Acropolis, totally desperate to make a deal. Lysistrata steps out as the masterful mediator. She scolds both sides, reminding them of their shared heritage, how the Laconians once fought alongside the Athenians to slay tyrants and deliver them from despotism. Suitably shamed and madly eager to just get back to their wives, the men agreed to absolutely all of her terms. A peace treaty is signed, and the whole thing ends with a massive, unifying, and totally hilarious banquet inside the Acropolis. The power of this narrative is undeniable. That is exactly why, even though it was written over 2 millennia ago, you still see it frequently performed today, like this 2009 production by Monash University. The play brings ancient history right into our present day. It remains this deeply resonant commentary on the sheer folly of war, the dangers of political corruption, and the absolute absurdity of strict sexual stereotyping. Aristophanes showed us a world where the supposedly irrational women were the only ones actually capable of imposing logic and order on a chaotic, male-driven catastrophe. Which leaves us with his final thought to chew on. By combining a strict economic lockdown with a highly organized, completely nonviolent social strike, Lysistrata managed to stop an endless, bloody war dead in its tracks. It really forces us to ask, is this 2,400-year-old burlesque comedy actually the ultimate masterclass in peaceful political resistance? It's a fascinating question to ponder. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this breakdown of Aristophanes' brilliant work has given you a whole new perspective on the enduring power and sheer genius of ancient comedy.